everyone, and thank you so much for waking up with me on Up with India. Today, I will be joined by a special guest. His name is Logan Herring, and he is the CEO of REACH Riverside, Kingswood Community Center, and the Teen Warehouse. Logan started his work in the Riverside neighborhood of Wilmington in 2016 as the executive director of Kingswood Community Center, which serves multi-generations. REACH and Kingswood Community Center also work in partnership with the Warehouse, a co-working facility and network for teen-serving organizations designed to address violence, academic performance, and workforce readiness amongst Wilmington's youth by providing them with access to more than 140 teen-focused program and service providers. Logan has also been recognized in the Delaware Business Times 40 under 40 class of 2018, which represents the best in a wide range of fields such as finance, law, nonprofit, hospitality, education, and technology. So I'm very happy to welcome him on Up with India. Logan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm going to take you on the road with me to do all my introductions.
Thank you. We will have a great time. You know,
I'm sure.
This is not our first rodeo together, Logan. I love the opportunity, any opportunity I get to talk with you, because you are such a transparent person, willing to give the details about what people need to know. And you have a really good story as well. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So like I was saying to our viewers, I interviewed Logan maybe a couple months ago, right? During the Millennial Summit. And we were having a conversation mostly about his life and mostly about kind of him growing up and those different types of things. But today I'll be talking to him particularly about his role as an executive and a business leader. So I'm really excited to get into the nitty gritty. But before we, get too far in to what it is that you do, I do want people to understand who it is that you are. So talk to me about growing up in Wilmington. We did discuss this the last time we got to chat, but for those that don't know, Logan did grow up in Wilmington, particularly what is now considered the West Center City. So I do want you to talk to me about growing up and what encouraged you to start volunteering and getting into the work you do.
Yeah. So West Side, the best side. Grew up on the west side of town, single mother household. I did all types of schooling. So I went from Montessori to public. I went to Lewis Elementary, Marbrook, HB, St. Mark's, Sanford. And then I went on to college down in Towson, Maryland. I grew up in it was a rough neighborhood, but when you're growing up, like it is what it is. So you don't really think of it in those terms. It's just like it's your neighborhood. So I still have pride in my neighborhood to this day. My mom has recently moved over to the east side. So 9th Street from west side to the east side. So still have a lot of ties in the community. And I think that's what makes this work so fulfilling for me, is that I come from these communities. My family comes from these communities. There's a legacy in the work that I do. So, I'm just a little bit more proximate in this role than many of the leaders that are in these nonprofit executive roles. And I think that has a huge influence on the decisions that I make, but also the team members that I bring on, all the stakeholders we have. So being able to come from the community, I think it just hits a little bit different when you're in these type of roles.
Mm-hmm. The song is West Philadelphia, born and raised, but it's West Center, Delaware, born and
Yeah.
raised. How did you spend most of your summers and days, Logan?
So you know what? Well, most of my summers as a kid, I was at the Frame Boys and Girls Club. So that's where I was every summer for summer camp. Like I looked forward to it. I remember one year my mom didn't have enough money to send me to camp, and I was just like heartbroken. And I didn't understand as a child, like, why I can't go to camp. Like, I don't remember what the cost was. It might have been $100 some dollars or whatever. I'm like, what you mean you don't have the money? She's like, you got to go over your aunt's house over east side where my mom now lives. And it was not a good feeling to go through that as a child, to want to be somewhere and not have the resources to make that happen. So, I didn't mean to get all sappy on you right now, but like, I just remember that feeling that I had. And I was like, as soon as I turned 14 And I had the opportunity, at that time you could work at the age of 14.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working at the Frank Boys and Girls Club, and that's where my involvement in working and serving a community started. I started as a camp counselor, and ever since then, it's been no looking back.
That is amazing. And don't say sappy, because that's a real honest, raw moment. I mean, there's so many people that can, I'm sure, relate to that. Not being able to financially afford opportunities to be able to leave their house and experience things outside of their neighborhood. So I completely understand, and I get it. I wanted to participate in cheerleading when I was in high school, but I couldn't because it was just not something that my family could afford. So that's a very real, issue that I think a lot of different people face. But it's
You want to hear something real, India? Because you sound transparent. So, like 2 minutes before we started this interview, my mom texted me, and she was like, "Hey, we're outside the warehouse, and we want to come inside. Is that okay? It's just two of us."
right.
So, it went from being a child over 20 years ago, or however long it was ago, 30 years, saying my age, to not being able to have the resources to go into a community center and pay for that. Now I'm running two of them, and my mom's outside, and I'm like, yeah, just tell them you're my mom if they don't know you at the front, and go ahead and walk through and do whatever you got to do. But full circle, and that literally happened 2 minutes before we started this interview. So when we started the interview, I saw her walk by my window. So that's the difference, you know what I mean? And that's what I take with me every day when I come to work.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Oh my goodness. I'm sure that, sometimes we forget how far we've come until moments like that happen, right? And it makes us reflect. But reflect for me just a moment, Logan. Take me to a key moment in your life that turned on the light bulb in your mind and made you realize that your passion would be in civic engagement. This is what you would be doing for the rest of your life.
Oh man, now you really want me to get emotional. So me, my best friend Eugene Young, and my brother Shannon Watson started a nonprofit. Eugene and I were 23. My brother's 13 years older than us. So when my brother calls me one day, he was like, yo, how would you like to help kids and make $40,000 a year? Now at the age of 23, $40,000 a year sounds like a lot of money.
Right.
So long story short, we ran an organization for 10 years called Delaware Elite, and I never got a paycheck at all. About 5 years into running Delaware Elite, and it was a mentoring program for student athletes. So we would use basketball as a carrot and give them all the other life skills that they would need to have success in life, providing with resources, exposure. We traveled all around the country, basketball tournaments, and in order to play for us, you had to, get a monitor sheet signed by your teachers. You had to do community service, social etiquette, the whole nine. Yeah. So about 4 or 5 years into running the organization, one of our student athletes, him and his mother suffered a home invasion, and his mother died in his arms. They were both shot. So at that moment, when I went to the hospital and they were like, Logan, he doesn't want to talk to anybody but you. And I go in there. That was back before people knew about trauma-informed care. I'm in my 20s. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. All I knew was love. But I also knew at that moment, we weren't equipped. We didn't have enough resources to be able to provide these young men and all the young men we were working with to give them that holistic, well-rounded support. And at that moment, I was like, yo, we got to do better. And at that moment, I knew I was on the hook, because no matter how much we thought we were doing, we weren't doing enough. So the reason why I go out and I talk to these, multimillionaires and funders and potential donors, and I'm unapologetic, is because, the circumstances that our community faces on a daily basis have little to nothing to do with decisions that we and our fathers and our grandfathers and grandmothers made. These were systemic institutional decisions, policies, practices, passed throughout time, 400 years of oppression that have created these circumstances. So when a young man loses his mom and she dies in his arms, he had nothing to do with that. The young men that even committed that crime most likely had nothing. That starts, a long time ago, that created these conditions where it's just survival mode. I don't know what those people who perpetrated that act, what they were going through, what they were trying to achieve with it. We just don't know. But we all know we have very similar backgrounds, growing up in low-income neighborhoods, growing up without a lot of resources. And that's not a fair shake. So, it's the most apropos time to be talking about this with the current election. the civil unrest, the racial injustice, the police brutality, all the things that we're seeing on the media outlets and in our country, local, national, even worldwide. And again, I know I'm rambling, but that was the moment where I was like, I'm in this for life in one way or another. And I didn't know it would manifest into what I'm doing now. But any youth, any family that comes into contact with our organizations, they shouldn't walk away like, all right, we can't take advantage because we don't have the funds to pay for it. That is not, something that we deal with. We make sure that everybody gets access to resources to the best of our ability.
It's very interesting that you talk about kind of how and why the world is the way that it is today. And when you talked about that piece about systemic oppression and those different things, these things that existed well before our time, what do you think when you hear people talk about reform? Do you think that that is the conversation that needs to be happening when it comes to creating change? Or do you think that things need to be dismantled and recreated in order for things to actually change, for communities to actually be better, for people to live better lives? What do you think, Logan?
Yeah, we have to, it's not an end all be all. There's no magic wand that says if we do reform or we do dismantling, that's going to necessarily fix it. We know that there's a lot that needs to be done. And, we can tackle it a bunch of different ways. We can compartmentalize it. We can look at it holistically and say what needs to be done. We just have to understand that we can't get frustrated or down when things don't happen as quickly as we want them to. We're talking about over 400 years of oppression. The powers that be that don't look like us, that have, layered on the barriers throughout generations. So, it's not going to take just one generation to solve it. I think it starts here. And it starts with, maybe reform is one way of looking at it before we dismantle it, or maybe it's dismantle and reform. I don't know, but I'm not the biggest policy person. I'm more into the execution. As a matter of fact, when we were running Delaware Elite, we would often joke like Eugene was the legislative branch and I was the executive branch. So he was out in the community, getting the fundraising, the advocacy work for our organization, and I was busy running the organization. So, I can't answer specifically, but I know there's a lot to be done and it's going to take time. And we have to be as intentional, perhaps even more intentional with how we make those decisions and who's in those positions to affect change. And when we're intentional in doing that, I think we begin to see some progress.
One of the organizations that you did go on to lead in 2016 was Kingswood Community Center. Talk to me about what the value of this community center was a few years ago and how it compares to present day. And do you think that community centers are as widely recognized as a symbol of hope and reputable help as they were when they were once envisioned?
Wow. So, well, Kingswood, nearly everybody that's grown up in the city of Wilmington, Newcastle County, has had some interaction with Kingswood Community Center, and that's all walks of life. Particularly in the past, when we used to, at Kingswood, back in the day, baseball tournaments and basketball tournaments and such, different activities that brought the broader community together. And a lot of that was lost throughout time, depending on the leadership that was at the helm. And most recently, the leadership that preceded me made some not so wise decisions, mismanagement of the organization, and Kingswood was about to close its doors. It had missed payroll. Wow. We were very fortunate, and this was before my time, that we had some community members that stepped up and gave Kingswood a lifeline. I'm talking about Tony Allen and Dave Sisko and Gary Stockbridge and my colleague now, Dave Ford and United Way. They all stepped in and provided a Band-Aid until we had a more longer-term fix. At the end of 2015, I was asked to come in to join the board to provide a little bit of youth and energy. And unbeknownst to me, they had a greater plan for my involvement. So I was only on the board for 3 months, and they asked me to step in as an interim executive director. And at that point, I ripped the covers off and saw how bad it was. And it took us about 2 years to turn around the organization. But we knew we had to save Kingswood, because Kingswood has been the heartbeat of the community for over 7 decades. I mean, you talk about every family and people of influence that have come through Kingswood and Riverside, everyone from our current board chair to Ray Rhodes, who is now the executive director of the Christina Cultural Arts Center. You talk about Marquivas Gideon, who runs Nerdit now, is putting technology and closing the digital divide in low-income communities. He grew up in Riverside, grew up as a Kingswood kid. You talk about my good friend, Roy Campbell, who everyone knows his son, Blake the Brain. Roy grew up in Riverside. There's so many stories of, just greatness that have come out of the neighborhood. And they all were at Kingswood. My dad played baseball at Kingswood, didn't grow up in Riverside, but the legacy, the history is so rich. And we often look at these communities and just see poverty. I'm in low-income families, but we see assets, we see richness, we see 12 acres of land, we see a 17,000 square foot facility, no matter how old it is. We see the people that work at Kingswood, that have worked at Kingswood, the people have gone in and out to summer camps, after school, the early learning academy. I mean, we need to start looking at ourselves as asset-based and not as deficits. And that's how we came in and looked at it, and we used the infrastructure that we built, the stability at Kingswood, to help catalyze the birth of REACH Riverside in the warehouse. And that's where we are today. So it's been a beautiful evolution from, a failing nonprofit to now 3 thriving nonprofits in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, crazy, super insane. But with the work that you put in, it's no doubt, that you are here where you are today. Talk to me about some of the programs offered at Kingswood Community Center and the age group of those that utilize the facility.
Yeah, so we like to say we serve everyone from the cradle to the cane. We don't like to put our seniors in the ground too early. So we have a full-time early learning academy, top notch. I mean, the improvements from, 4 years ago to now, the curriculum that's being delivered, the staff and their expertise, and their passion for the work, the physical setting itself. I mean, it looks as new as it possibly could look for a 60, 70-year-old building. We have a senior center that was recently renovated where we provide senior services. We provide family support through our FACET program, which stands for Families and Centers Empowered Together, which is run by Miss Cookie, who is self-proclaimed and community proclaimed as the Queen of Riverside. So everybody loves Miss Cookie. We have a great organization. We provide that support for our families, whether it's the holidays, the summertime, school time, any time of the year, no days off. I often say that the community's issues, the community's problems don't stop at 5 o'clock on Friday. So we're with our community, for our community, every single day of the week, whether it's a Harvest Fest that we have coming up November 8th, we'll be providing turkeys and food. We with our partners, distributed over 9,000 meals during this pandemic. And I can go on about what we've done, but, not to toot our own horn, but Kingswood is a staple in the community. And I'm so excited, not just where Kingswood is, but where Kingswood is and will become. In the next few years, we plan to build a state-of-the-art at least 60,000 square foot facility, state-of-the-art campus for the existing and future residents of Riverside.
Amazing. About some of those resources that you say is most utilized by the groups that attend.
So I can talk about, if you don't mind, what we did during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So during the pandemic, I had this crazy concept that we need to raise money so we can distribute cash, direct cash to the family, to the communities. And there are about 300 families in the Riverside public housing community. And my goal was to be able to raise enough money to distribute $250 in cash every single family for at least 3 months during the pandemic. We did not know the pandemic was going to last this long. We didn't know if we were going to be successful in raising this money, but that was my goal. And it was like, all right, well, let's just get a month under our belts and see how successful we are. We distributed $250 in cash to every single family for 5 months.
Wow.
We distributed over $280,000. We partnered with Marquivas and distributed 342 Chromebooks, 9,000 meals. We got people signed up for GED program, Department of Labor. We provided PPE. The list goes on. We even partnered with, we still partner with Christiana Care to do testing, COVID testing twice a week. We've done that since April with Christiana Care at Kingswood Community Center. We moved our positive test rate from 21% to 13%. We got 72 families in addition to who had already signed up for the census to sign up for the census, which moved our census rate from less than 60% to over 84%, which will be over $6 million resources, federal funding coming back into the community. So, we got extremely busy during this time, and what it did for us, we often talk about what we do for the community, but what it did for us as an organization is it helped us to further establish trust with the community, relationships, up-to-date contact information. And because of that, just for example, like we have contact with a lot of the local businesses in Riverside, Northeast Wilmington. They now send us when they have job openings, and we distribute it through the community. And now we're helping to facilitate our residents getting hired. Like it's unbelievable, what we as a community were able to accomplish during this pandemic. And as we transition forward, there are some other supportive initiatives that we're going to do to continue to invest in our community, invest in the human capital. We throw out large numbers like this is a $250 million project, and we're going to put X amount of dollars into Kingswood in the warehouse. But how much money, how much of investment are we putting into our community, the human capital? And we talked earlier about the disinvestment. We talked about the resources that have been lacking and the barriers. We gotta flip the dynamic and change the paradigm for how we really step in the gaps and help our fellow community members.
Definitely. This is the first time that the world has seen a global pandemic in this way. But has this impact that you and Kingswood joined hands in with other partners, is this the first time that you've been able to do what you've done at this level in the history of Kingswood?
I don't want to undermine and I don't want to discredit anything that has happened in the past with Kingswood and the previous leaders, because I stand on the shoulders of them. I stand on the shoulders of, Bernadette Winston and, Reverend Oliver and, twin poets and everybody who has worked at Kingswood in some way, shape, or form. Because if it weren't for them, we would not have this platform. If they didn't start Kingswood and run Kingswood, there would be no Kingswood, and I would not have gotten involved. Yeah. So, I would never say anything to disparage anything that they have accomplished, because I am here because of them. But I would say that during my tenure, I can look back and we have one of our core values is a saying, and the saying is, remember when you pray for what you have today. And I remember when coming in and a $5,000 donation, like we jumped through the moon. And not to say I don't want $5,000 donations, but let's just say that, I get excited when there's a couple commas in the contribution, like really excited. And we have a thing here where we ring the bell every time we get a contribution, no matter how small. So I don't want to, persuade anyone not to contribute to what we're doing. But, everything that we have done during this pandemic has been, to your question directly, on another level. And I would say it's on another level because of the level of engagement that we've had with the community. And not just the residents, because we, just touched base on that, but the broader community, people that are now becoming more aware because it's mainstream. It's a conversation. It's a constant topic of racial injustice, housing segregation, redlining, criminal justice reform, police brutality. Like people may have been somewhat aware, like a cursory knowledge, but now the knowledge that they have is so much deeper and it's so much persistent that the folks who have the means, who have sat on the sidelines, now want to be in the game. Right. And we, with our visibility in the community and nonprofit sector in the city of Wilmington, the state of Delaware, as visible as we are, the profile that we have, we often get sought out and people, want to learn more about. And when they walk through the warehouse, when they hear our plans for Riverside, they're quick to support and support our mission, which is to support our residents in our community. So I would say the response from the community has been great. The response from us and organization has been great. And also the response from the broader community and supporters has been just tremendous. And, I don't think to this level, this magnitude in the history of Kingswood, we've ever been able to connect both sides. And I don't want to say their sides because I think we're all in this together.
Sure.
But I would say there's like almost two different worlds, the haves and the have-nots. And now we're coming together to see that we're all one race, which is the human race. And we all want the same basic things. We all want to eat, like we all need to be fed. We want
Right.
to be healthy. We
Right.
want our kids, to be educated. We want to have good paying jobs. Like everybody wants that.
Mm-hmm.
So, to understand now that we have more common threads between us, and Kingswood being the convener for that has meant all the world to me as a leader.
Congratulations on
Thank you.
all of that success, Logan. Honestly, that is really, really amazing. And I'm glad that you led the way that you did, which was by saying that none of this would be possible without the people that came before you. Everyone joining hands and locking arms is what helps move communities forward. And it is those key individuals that help make it happen. Who would you say, in your opinion, are some of the leaders at the Kingswood that stand out to you the most, and that you can tell that they are really in it for the passion and not just a paycheck?
Yeah, so I talked about Miss Cookie earlier, who's been at Kingswood for forever. Miss Debbie, who has been teaching at Kingswood, I want to say like 25 years, something ridiculous like that. Miss Jocelyn, who runs our senior center. Julie Bieber, who has been working with us for over a year now. She was at REACH Riverside as our director of, oh man, what did I get? Global impact. But she is now the director of operations. So she runs like the day to day at Kingswood. So Julie is fantastic. We have so many people, and I know they're going to kill me. Miss Eunice, who cooks in the kitchen, like everybody. Mr. Abe, who helps maintain the grounds. My right and my left hand, Kenyatta McCurdy Bird, who's my COO for all the organizations, and Dave Ford, who's the chief financial strategist for all the organizations. Like, this is such a collective effort, and no one organization does it alone. As you said in my introduction, I run 3 organizations, and we affectionately call ourselves the Work Group, WRK, the Warehouse, Reach, Riverside, and Kingswood. And we truly operate like, if the warehouse has something that will benefit Kingswood, Kingswood has something that will benefit the warehouse, we share and share alike. And Reach Riverside really serves as the management organization for all 3. So, when you say Kingswood and who are the people there, we can't forget about the people at the warehouse. We can't forget about the people at Reach Riverside. We can't forget about the people at Kingswood Academy, who's an alternative school that we run as well, that's located inside of the warehouse. So there's so many individuals, and heaven forbid I forget about our teens. We employ currently 16 teens, and next year we'll probably employ over 125 teens. So yeah.
We're definitely going to get into those details, of course, as we start to talk a little bit more about the teen warehouse, because I'm very interested in that piece about the alternative school. It's very interesting, Logan. But for those that don't know, let's pivot for a second and introduce what Reach Riverside and the significance of that corporation is here in the city of Wilmington.
Yeah, so Reach Riverside was formed 2 years ago, actually the end of 2017, as a development corporation to oversee this $250 million revitalization of the Riverside neighborhood. And the revitalization, the redevelopment of the Riverside neighborhood has been something that has been, I wouldn't say necessarily planned. It's been somewhat planned, but it does nothing if you don't execute on it. Has been talked about for decades, and nothing has ever come to fruition. Within the next 30 to 60 days, we're actually going to begin construction on the first phase of housing, which will be 74 units. We've already secured the funding to do the first 2 phases of housing, which is 141 units. The entire project will be about 600 units of housing. And when we talk about units of housing, we're talking about affordable rental, market rate rental, home ownership, the whole nine, a mixed income community. And that's what's beautiful about this. It's not just one income level. We a broad, diverse set of incomes, diverse set of people with the primary focus is not to displace anyone off of the current footprint. So I know that's always the topic of conversation. I'll address it. I'll say it before anybody asks the question. We are not looking to displace. And I have 2 things that can point to that. One, the first 3 phases of housing is being built on vacant land. So with most of these projects, you have to demolish and then rebuild. We don't have to do that. So that's one. Two, I'm currently raising a lot of money to help provide an economic mobility initiative, which will provide a customized support plan for each family to help them move up the economic ladder to those desired different levels of income. So, with those two things combined, our goal again is not to displace, kick anyone out of the Riverside neighborhood. And that's what I want people to understand about me as a leader. Like, I didn't grow up in Riverside, but I understand because I come from these communities. And the last thing I would want is somebody to displace me or tell you got to move. I don't know where you're going to move, but you got to move. Like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Not on my watch if I have anything to do with it. And I don't want to make any bold promises or overpromise, but I won't be involved with anything like that.
And I'm so glad that you did jump the gun and get to that and talk about that. Oh, because honestly, that is the conversation that people are having, and oftentimes when we talk about the revitalization of lower income spaces, people feel like they're going to be left out of the conversation. But why do you think that is? Why is that you hear that there's going to be this opportunity to improve a community, but immediately people hear, oh, this doesn't apply to me. Why is that?
Well, we talked about it earlier. Like, look at this country's history. I mean, let's take a step back and look at Riverside. Riverside was built in the 50s. It was public housing for white veterans coming back from war. Southbridge was built for Black veterans. And during the time of white flight, when this country handed out $120 billion in mortgages and less than 2% were available to people of color, particularly Black people, whites moved out to Greenville and Hockessin and were able to build equity, generational wealth through home ownership as the prices for those homes skyrocketed. And Blacks were relegated to inner city communities where the property values didn't rise at all. Actually, it's dropped. I owned a home over on East Side. When I got the home, it was willed to me in college. It was worth $40,000. I ended up selling it a couple of years ago for $26,000 on Pine Street, and was happy because it's like, well, at least I got something out of it before it's not worth anything. So, I mean, let's keep it all the way real. Like, we have to look at this country's history. So yeah, I'm skeptical. Like, I've been skeptical. Anytime I hear anything that can say, well, it sounds a little too good to be true. So, you know what? I want our community keep that skepticism. Like, keep asking me those questions, keep probing, because you push me and give me the energy to have those questions. I'm not the sole person that makes all of the decision, but I have influence. And I try to use my influence, and my team does as well, to make sure that we look out for the people that have, in the past might have been voiceless, but not necessarily just look out for them, but bring them along with us to empower them to be part of the decision-making process. So we've done that. We have community members that are a part of our board. We have community members that have been a part of our master planning process to determine what the community is going to look like. What are going to be the resources in the community? What do we want at the new Kingswood Community Center? For the warehouse, our board chair is a 17-year-old senior in high school. Like, you can't get any more closer to empowering the community than those type of decisions and making that a part of your infrastructure. And that's what I talked about earlier, being intentional about how we break down those barriers and make sure that people that look like us are in positions to really, really provide influence and change the way things have been done for far too long.
Is a part of the conversation any talks about how to ensure that these properties, these purpose-built communities, as it is called, remain in the condition that is habitable for those that live there? I don't know if you've been paying attention or watching some of the controversy going on right now with the Wilmington Housing Authority and a residency home that is home to over 200 senior residents that right now is failing. And so people are being affected. They are saying that it's not safe, that it's not a place that they would have imagined they'd be living in when there was a set amount of money that was given at a point in time to build it and to make it what it should be. Are there any conversations about how to not end up in a situation like that in years to come?
Yeah, so our master developer is Penrose, and they're out of Philadelphia. They're one of the top affordable housing developers in the country. Not only is Penrose developing homes and building them, but they're also going to manage the homes as well. And their track record speaks enough for them. So I would ask anyone, if you're concerned, feel free to Google Penrose, call their properties, go visit them. And we've had the luxury of doing that. So, because again, I come with that same skepticism. Our community comes with that same fatigue. We actually, with some of our residents and community members, went down to visit these Penrose sites, because not only do we want to see what is possible, we also wanted to get up close and personal and talk to the residents that were at those locations. And everyone had nothing but good things to say about Penrose. So we're very confident in them as a partner to make sure that they deliver on their promise to not only build high quality housing, but also to maintain them and manage them as well.
You said in the next 30 to 60 days, the process of redevelopment will begin.
Yeah, we go to financial closing. I don't want to give a date. I have a date, but you're familiar with closing on like one house is
Right,
difficult enough, and it always gets pushed back.
exactly.
Closing on 74 homes, so
Things
the goal in the next 30 days will be closing, and then as soon as we close, we put a shovel in the dirt and we start building homes.
now
And the first homes will be available in about a year.
how has the process been coming along at the least, if you could share that with us?
The process has been complex and comprehensive. Put on my politically correct hat. It's a very involved project. As you said and you mentioned, we're working with an organization out of Atlanta called Purpose-Built Communities, and they provide us technical assistance for free. They're funded by Warren Buffett and two other billionaires. We're one of only 28 communities that are purpose-built communities around the country.
Wow.
And the level of support that they have provided us along the way, everything from securing the developer to locking down their master development agreement, to negotiating with our partners around economic development, workforce development. I mean, you name it. Every aspect of what we do as REACH Riverside has been supported, even strategic planning, by purpose-built communities and its staff. So having that as a resource, and also having the other communities where we've created a community of practice where we can lend best practices, pick up the phone, hey, what did you do around this, and so forth and so on, has given us a little bit of reprieve and help during these tumultuous times, not just with the pandemic, but just this project in general. When you're throwing out $250 million as a figure, you can imagine how complex these circumstances, these conversations, these agreements get. And coming from somewhere where I didn't have, my mom didn't have $100 to send me to summer camp for a week. Just to see, as you said earlier, to be a part and privy to these conversations, for them to look at me and what I think I've learned, and I try to bestow upon people that I might mentor or people, my colleagues, is that we always have value to add to a conversation, to a room. And that's our lived experiences and our perspective. And that's something that no one can take from us. So I might be in rooms with attorneys and developers, and they might be speaking a different language, and understand I speak a different language too. So being able to translate what the community is saying, what we're feeling, and being able to use that to influence decisions that are being made is, one of the best feelings in the world.
Talk to me about some of the conversations surrounding the beautification process that will be surrounding the purpose-built communities. Are there any conversations happening? And do you plan to utilize any of the artistic communities here in Wilmington to help with that process?
Yeah, I would say yes to all of that. As a matter of fact, part of our master plan is in the very center of the entire revitalization is a town green, where people can congregate together like a central meeting place. Diagonal from that will be the new state-of-the-art Kingswood Community Center. I know Ray Jones Avery has been getting on me about making sure the arts are part of this and making decisions when we're planning. So I know I owe her a number of conversations when we get to a point where I think that that would be beneficial to our planning process. And obviously the arts are a big part of what we're doing at the warehouse. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, we're doing that. We're also looking at bike lanes, widening sidewalks, um, changing some of the streets. So 26th Street comes straight through the neighborhood, and we'll be able to connect all the way down to Market Street, so you can have direct access to downtown in a number of different ways. We're looking at beautifying Northeast Boulevard and supporting those existing businesses and potential future businesses. We're looking at putting a local grocer on Northeast Boulevard as well, so we have access to healthy food. There's nothing wrong with a dollar store here and there. We have three. There's nothing wrong with Popeyes. There's nothing wrong with corner stores. Look, I grew up in the hood. I get it. Like, the corner store was sometimes the end all be all. But at the end of the day, like, if that's your only option, then we're doing something wrong as a community. So we just want to make sure we have options and people can make informed decisions that are best for their community at any given time.
Mm-hmm. Tynita Brown, the former director of community impact and strategic partnerships at REACH Riverside, will be transitioning on. But talk to me about your relationship with her while she was there, as I heard that there is a space or a position opening up now. And I definitely want to know what would be the best type of candidate that you'd be looking for to fill that position.
Yeah. So I would say distraught. I'm a little sad. Janetta was with us for over a year. She was our director of marketing, communications, and development at one point. About a month ago, we alleviated her with the burden of development as well. It was just too much for one person to handle all of it. And then most recently, she was just named, and she'll be taking over the Philanthropy Delaware helm as a CEO. And
Yeah.
I couldn't be more excited for any one individual. She deserves it. I'm glad that she was able to serve with us for a year. And she has a lot of thoughts about what that next candidate should and shouldn't be able to do. So if she has her way, she probably is a little bit more strict on terms of what that person might come with experience and such. But what we're looking for at the end of the day, I don't ask a lot of questions when I interview people. I usually allow my colleagues to do that. But the one question I always ask is, like, what's your why? Like, what's your passion? What's the thing that's going to keep you up at night? As I said, we at the warehouse, REACH Riverside, and Kingswood Community Center, we understand that the community's issues don't stop at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. So a lot of times we're working around the clock. A lot of times we're working on weekends. We don't see this as a job. We see this as a labor of love. And everyone that works here, at least to the best of my knowledge, I can say that really wants to do more than just earn a paycheck. And I would also say that we compensate well, because I understand that this is hard work, and I believe that people in the nonprofit sector, in my opinion, no offense, should be paid more than the private sector.
Why is that?
I just believe that. I believe because we're doing the work within the communities that is needed, and we often work long hours. We're asked to go above and beyond. A lot of times, you can ask anybody that works in this space, they probably dug into their own pocket at one given time. And I think that the level of burnout that we see within this sector is real. We've instituted something called Mental Health Mondays recently here within our organizations, where I know you were trying to schedule me for a Monday, and she's like, "Can you do it, Logan? Make an exception." I'm like, "I'm not making any exceptions. I'm supposed to be setting the example." Mondays, we're not allowed to have meetings.
Okay.
No internal or external meetings
That makes
whatsoever. Mondays, 4 hours out of the day, you're not allowed to work.
That's awesome.
You have to do something health related.
Wow.
We have a partnership with Jewish Family Services where we do group and individual counseling on Mondays.
Wow.
And then 4 hours out of the day, you can work, but it should be more like strategic and thoughtful, or you're catching up on emails, or you're planning out your week. We've been doing that for, I think, 7 weeks now. And I mean, the transition for some people's approach to coming into work, they're happier, they're more productive. I mean, it's been a beautiful thing to see. And what we want to do is partner with JFS to provide the support for the entire nonprofit sector. So that's something we're working on as well. But yeah, that's why I said that. I mean, the work here is real, and I work around the clock nonstop and rarely take vacations. So sometimes you have to build that into your weekly schedule.
Oh, for sure. I understand the need to disconnect, and I think that's so cool that it's integrated into your work development, process. So that's really awesome. And again, I thank you for making the time to be here with me because I do know how much work that goes into. Well, I don't know. I don't really know all the details of how much work that goes into it behind the scenes, but I can just imagine. And especially with you running three different uh, uh, avenues, it's a lot. So I really, really do thank you for being here, Logan. There is this underrated, some people would say overrated, but I say that it's underrated. An underrated saying that it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a community. And the reason why I say that it's underrated is because I don't think that people really understand the gravity of what that really means anymore. But I do want to get your perspective and your take on it. Do you think that the village still exists? Or do you think over the years people have lacked what it takes to have empathy for other people and children that are not directly related or connected to
Whew, the village. The village exists here at the warehouse.
them?
That's our motto. Like, yeah. Th- so I think I know growing up I had a village. And it is because of that village that I am where I am today. And what I try to do is create villages. I think there could be multiple villages. I think back in the day, the village was bigger and there were more. And I think that the youth, the people that have villages, are more successful than those that don't. And I think what we find today is that we're lacking in villages in our communities. We're lacking for accountability. I often, when I talk to potential funders or anyone about our organizations, I go to statistics because numbers don't lie. Women lie, men lie, numbers don't.
That's what they say.
And in Riverside, 87% of the households are led by single women. That is not a village. And what I mean by that is, and again, I'll give you a historical context. So we talked about white flight. Riverside was a white neighborhood. It became black. Then if you look at the crack epidemic and how it hit black communities all across this country, Riverside was no different. During that time, in this country, treated it as a criminal justice issue. We didn't treat the opioid epidemic as a criminal justice issue. And you know where I'm going with that. When it affects a certain color of people, we see things a little bit differently. And during the crack epidemic throughout this country, African American males between the age of 29, 1 in 4 was either locked up or on parole. And public housing policies prohibited returning citizens from coming back into public housing. So if you look at that history and that timeline, there's a reason why 87% of the households in Riverside are led by single women. That is intentional. That is not something we did to ourselves. It is the exact opposite of the rest of the state. 13% of the state of Delaware is led by single parents. So that is a key indicator when a family is led by single parents, a key indicator for high school dropout rates, teenage pregnancy, future generations ending in divorce, just a basic lack of human and economic resources. And back to the topic that we're talking about now is the village. How do you have a village when nearly everybody is struggling, when nearly everybody has one parent in their household? So I remember when my mom was at work, oh, go down the street to Miss Brandy's, or your grandmother's coming over, go next door, and vice versa. Oh, go down to Miss Tony's house. We don't have that ability anymore because most people are out working. So what you see is the youth left up to their own devices, raising themselves. They can't go to community centers if they're a teenager because most of the community centers deal with childcare because that's a revenue stream. And there's childcare licensing laws that says if you're over the age of 12, you can't be in the same space of those that are 12 and under, which is the reason why we started the warehouse, because the teens needed their own designated space for that most vulnerable time after school between 3 and 6, which is where most of our teens get in trouble because they have nowhere to go and nothing to do. And then you try to attract their attention. After 6 o'clock, they're already doing what they're doing. I know if I had 3 hours after the day, what I'd be doing or I'd be thinking about doing when I was a teenager if I didn't have somewhere to go. So, yeah, the villages are lacking, but we do have great people out in the community that are creating villages, that have built villages. I look at Cooley over the east side. You know what I mean? Somebody that I grew up with basketball against and with. There are so many examples of people doing the right thing and helping to build villages. But, there are few and far between, or I don't say necessarily few and far between, but I think there's a lot left to be desired, as we see with the, the violence that has been plaguing our youth for far too long.
It's interesting that you bring up someone like Cooley, who has contributed to helping with some of the violence, helping with some of the issues. Do you think that there is disparity in funding when it comes to the types of organizations that get the support that they need in order to continue to try to be a village for those that are in the surrounding community?
There's a huge disparity, a huge disparity in funding for our community programs. And I would say the reason, and this is one of the first things I believe I said to you in this interview, most of the people that run nonprofits are white. And white people come with a certain social capital network that has access to other white people or places or foundations or organizations that have resources. And it's just a fact. It's a matter of fact. Like it is a fact. And there's no way around it. So, funding is all about relationships, like literally all about relationships. It's not about who has the greatest application or the greatest project all the time. It's really about, all right, does this leader or does he have board members or stakeholders that have a relationship with this funding opportunity or these resources? And I use it to my advantage. And I've been very fortunate in that regard. But I know not all of our community members, all of our grassroots-led organizations have access to those resources, those abilities. And that's why, one of our initiatives that we're looking to start here at the warehouse is to support those nonprofits of color. I've been very fortunate in my position to have access to great resources. And one of those resources has been an organization out of DC called Prosperity Now. And for over 2.5 years, I've been a part of a cohort of nonprofits, and it's called Building High Impact Nonprofits of Color, where they provide resources and invest in the leadership of people of color for organizations that serve people of color. So it's Kingswood, it's LACC, it's the Christina Cultural Arts Center, the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, First State or True Access Capital, DCRAC. Those are organizations that I work with. And then we work in partnership with a number of organizations out of Dallas. And we're paired together and we'll provide professional development, executive coaching, access to funders, different strategies around strategic planning. And what we want to do is replicate that model and do it for local grassroots efforts here, where we can provide that support for them so they can get those resources that are needed back in the community.
What were some of the steps that you had to take in order to establish the warehouse? I always want to say team warehouse, and I don't want them beating me up because I know
the teams don't like that. That's our corporate name, so it's not incorrect. As a matter of fact, we couldn't do the warehouse because it was taken on social media for Facebook, so we had to do the team. But anyway. Yeah. So the question, what were the steps?
Yeah, the steps, to getting to establish it.
Well, first is the vision, and everybody wants to give me credit for all that takes place in Riverside with our organizations. You're the great visionary and blah, blah, blah. One thing I think I am creative to a certain extent, but what I'm really good at is listening, and I got big ears for a reason. So I listen, and I might come up with an idea, but I bring in other people and I listen and we refine it and evolve it, and it grows throughout time. So, the concept of the warehouse was really, we don't have the capacity at Kingswood to serve our teens. I talked about the child care licensing issues. Kingswood is small. We didn't have, enough space if we were to separate our teens. They couldn't come in till 5:30, 6 o'clock. So there was a warehouse, and there still is, right down the street from Kingswood. It's actually adjacent to our property on Vanderbilt Ave. It's 113,000 square foot facility. we were going to rent about 10,000 square feet, and we invited about 4 major partners and say, look, we want to do something specifically for teens, but we want you guys, Boys and Girls Clubs and others, to come in and operate it. And you guys be the partners that operate the program. We started to meet with a number of partners, and then I pitched this idea at the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation's Reinventing Delaware dinner that happens every year. And every year, 100 people come in with different ideas about how to make Delaware a better version of itself. And I pitched this idea at the end of 2017 at the Reinventing Delaware dinner, and the warehouse won. With that, we got resources, support, technical assistance to help, continue to build on the vision. It snowballed so quickly that we realized 10,000 square feet wasn't enough space. So we began to look out in the community, and I saw that Prestige Academy had closed. And I was like, well, let's go take a look. Like, who owns it? So we found out that Capital One owned the building because it was given to them. They acquired it through ING, who used to own it. Prestige had closed in 2017. And we were like, after we walked through it, we were like, we need this building. It was built in 2000, practically brand new. And then, again, access to resources. Talked to Thayer DuPont and talked to Mayor Przicki and said, can you go with me and my colleague, Dave Ford, to pitch this idea to Capital One? We got traction, we got the partnerships, we got leadership, we got a team. All we need is a facility. And we pitched it to them. 6 months later, Dave and I are at a Purpose-Built Communities conference in Orlando, Florida. He calls me from the airport, and he's like, Logan, guess who just called me? I was like, who? He's like, Joe Westcott from Capital One. They're going to donate the building to us. $3.6 million building donated for this cause. And we raised enough money to put $3 million in renovations into the building.
Wow.
And that's happened in less than 3 years. All of that has happened. And we were supposed to open in April during spring break, and COVID. So we're just sitting here like when can we want teens in here? So we're thinking about beginning to open in a phased approach, like during Thanksgiving break. But we were able to sign up, I think, over 175 teens during the pandemic. And we've been doing virtual programming through something we call the WAVE, which is Warehouse Advanced Virtual Experience.
Are the teens coming up with these names? Because they're little.
The teams come up with the majority of the names. But hold on, I'm not that far removed now. So I came up with 2 names in here. The first is our storefront. As soon as you walk in, it's a storefront where they'll be able to sell merchandise that they produce, like screen printing T-shirts and such. We call Warehouse Swag.
Okay.
I gave it the name of the Drip.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. The Drip.
And then we're about to convert our courtyard to look like Maker's Alley, Constitution Yards a little bit. I came up with the yard, and they like that one.
I like that.
So they have to approve everything. So we run it by, they approve it. But I had 2 things make the cut. Everything else they did. Like our demonstration kitchen is called Cook It Real Good. Our copy and print center, which is in the shape of an oval, is called the Oval Office.
Oh, that's dope.
Our art studio, King and Queen's Art Studio. Like one of the rooms is called the Resume to focus on career exploration. So they're smart.
Y'all crazy over there.
Yeah. They're nice with it. They're nice. Yeah.
HBCU days. That's what that.
Right.
That is very creative. Talk to me about who are some of the teams that help run the day-to-day operations and how you sought out their leadership for the program, the facility, not just the program.
Yeah. So we've been working with our teams, a core of them, for over 2 years now. And we engaged with them when we were meeting with these partners in the beginning of all of this. And we reached out to our partners and we say, look, we're partnering with DHSS, and they're going to provide funding, and we're going to hire 20 teens, and we need to go through our application process. Literally, within 72 hours, we have 55 teens apply.
Wow.
And that was just from all of our community organizations. Delaware Futures, West End Neighborhood House, Hilltop Community Center. We reached out to all of the people that we were partnering with and said, send us your teens, and they have to go through the application process, and then we'll hire them. We've kept a number of those teens employed throughout these 2 years. The teens have worked with an architect to design the space. They worked with the interior designer to pick out the furniture. and the color schemes. As we talked about, they named the rooms. Ayanna Patterson, who's one of those teens we've been working with for 2 years, is our board chair. She runs all of our board meetings. She knows Robert's Rules of Order. Jessica Gibson from Newcastle County is serving as her mentor to make sure she's prepared for the board meetings. So it's just been phenomenal. I do 3 board meetings. So I have 3 different boards, and the warehouse, no offense to Kingswood or REACH, it's a little bit different when you have a 17-year-old running a board meeting, and it's special. We have an executive teen committee. So Anaya runs the executive committee. She's the president of the executive committee. And then she has 4 executive committee members with her. And the executive committee decides what they want done. And then they tell her, and then she comes back and informs the board. So it's really that we call it 4 teens by teens, but we really call it teen-led, adult-guided. Yeah. So Anaya Patterson is the lead for our teens. And we have other ones like Ariane and Jamir, Kyer. You see them on our video. Those are like the core of our teens. They call themselves the OGs. The teens come in different cohorts. And we just got a deal with Bacini Poland Group, funded by JP Morgan Chase, where over the next year we'll be doing, we have something called Teens in Motion, which is a workforce development training program that we do for 90 days for all of our teens. So whether they're employed with us or external partners, they are prepared with all of the soft skills, financial literacy, showing up on time, dressing, whatever, all the things that we need to know as employees, as adults, because what we hear from our employers is like, I can teach technical skills, but if they don't know how to act, if they don't know how to show up on time, they don't know work ethic, like those are the things that we need. They don't know how to manage their funds. So this is something that we put our teens through. Bacini Poland and JP Morgan have agreed to fund 100 teens, 25 teens every 90 days, and they'll be placed into the hospitality and culinary fields within the BPG related entities throughout the city.
Wow, that is really awesome. First of all, such amazing young people that are part of the program. Shout out to each and every one of them that has a hand in this. That last part kind of reminds me of a program that used to be a part of when you were in high school. I think it was called JF or something like that. And you went and you learned different trades and you just learned how to be a better professional. And I haven't heard.
Was it Junior Achievement?
Junior Achievement, that's JA.
Yeah, Junior Achievement is still, JA. Junior Achievement is a partner of ours, and they're still, rock and rolling. Yeah, they're over right across from ShopRite.
Yes.
Yeah, they have a whole business center with like a bank and a group. Yeah, and they teach you how to, the business center. Now they're a great partner, as well. And we're also we'll be employing another 25 teens through a Department of Labor grant we just got, and they will focus on like IT services. So those teams will be placed with like Nerd It Now and other organizations like that to learn that career. Because what we see is, one, you need exposure, exploration to determine what you're going to do in life. Like you asked me, when did you know you were going to be doing this? Like I could tell you, like I really didn't know until my 30s, but there were certain things that happened throughout my life where I knew I wanted to do something in the service area, but I didn't know what it was. And it worked out for me, but sometimes it takes time for us to figure out what we want to do. And, all you hear back in the day were the traditional, like you want to be a fireman, a policeman, a doctor, a lawyer. There were so many different careers, particularly around technology. And particularly now during the pandemic, like think of all the things that people are doing now where they felt like they had to be physically somewhere to do it. That's not the case anymore.
Do you believe that young people that are part of community programs like this would have found the Teen Warehouse if they were not referred or already seeking out the help?
So our teens do all the advertising to the other teens. So, for example, like when we started to pilot some of the programs 2 years ago, when we started working with the teens, they did a teen night. And I'm doing that in quotation marks because they will argue me to this day that it wasn't a party. So I'll be like, yo, y'all threw a party. Like, no, let's keep it real. Like, if you ask anybody in the community right now, was Logan at all the parties in high school? I was at the PAL, I was at Nerd Temple, I was at the center. All right, I digress. But I know a party when I see a party.
Right.
And when you advertise on Instagram for 3 days
Oh my
and
goodness.
when 300 to 400 teens show up at the
Right.
Wilmington Pad, that's a party.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a teen night.
Yeah.
So, but what I saw was something powerful when that happened. Is like, I'm not going to be able to advertise to teens like, come check out this program or come to the warehouse. Like, that's not it.
Mhm.
Like, the teens advertise that.
Mhm.
So the reason why we have 175 teens that have signed up during this pandemic is the teens they become ambassadors.
Mhm.
So they believe with so much conviction the warehouse, its mission, and what we're going to achieve, that they are able to communicate that to other teens, and that's what's gained the traction to get 175 teens to sign up.
How do teens connect with teens that would never willingly walk through your doors? I'm talking about those that are just not attracted to things like this. I'm talking about those that sometimes fall to the wayside. How do they do that? How do they convince them that this is where they need to be?
So peer pressure is something, and peer pressure isn't always negative.
Mm.
Be positive too. And when you have more people or a good amount of people doing the right thing, you see that one, it's possible, but you also want to be a part. Like, it's become cool to be a part of something positive. For example, last year, the warehouse partnered with Howard High School, and it was funded by Newcastle County. And what we did was we helped Howard offer a different approach to detention. It was more restorative practice. So at the beginning of the school year, instead of doing detentions, they did restorative justice or restorative circles and programming. So I think there were like 8 or 9 people that earned detention, and there were like another 47 teens that showed up to participate in the program.
Mm.
And again, everybody is innately good. Like, you want to do good things. But if all you see is bad, if all you see is struggle and survival, that's what you're going to migrate to. And if you see more positive, more opportunities for hope and to be prosperous and a way out of your current circumstances, if they're negative, then you're going to be attracted to that and migrate towards that. And that's what we see. The warehouse, first of all, when you walk in here, like, if you see the pictures, but when you walk in here, it's a different feeling. And it's not just for teens, like anybody who walks in here. I got 70, 80-year-old men doing tours, and like, they don't want to leave. And we believe that, if it's not just through the word of mouth and the teens getting to them, all you got to do is walk into the space one time. And at the end of the day, even if we didn't have the state-of-the-art facility, I think one of the biggest things that we overlook are the people that are connected. Like, you think about Coach Lee at Salvation Army. You know what I mean? Like, Salvation Army was the greatest facility. I've gone to Frame Boys and Girls that wasn't the greatest facility, but I remember people like Frenchie and Carlos and George, Rachel Kane. All these community centers that have like their staples. People think back to Kingswood, the Twin Poets. Like, there's always the people aspect of it that I think we often overlook. And I think at the end of the day, like, the people involved with our organizations they're different. They're a cut above, and they're really passionate. And it gets back to why I asked that question, like, what's your why, when I do interviews, because we can always hang our hat on that.
One of the issues that the Teen Warehouse focuses on combating is gun violence. And as we've seen a rise in violence in the city of Wilmington, it's not necessarily something that is new, but it's a rise. And we're seeing a lot more young people being impacted by this. What do you say to people who see the rise in gun violence here in the city of Wilmington as not their problem? And in your opinion, does an issue have to arise in someone's backyard in order for it to matter?
I think the closer you are to something, the more it is impactful to your life when you face it. But I think now, with everything happening, there's a little bit more empathy. in areas where you might not necessarily be as directly involved or directly impacted by it. And what I mean by that is you see it on TV, you see it on social media. You see it in areas of Wilmington where you might have driven by there, or you might have been at Kingswood and see that the shooting happened down the street. You might have volunteered at a school and realized that one of the students that was affected by this is one of the students you mentored. We aren't that far removed as a city and the state where you don't know somebody that's been directly affected by it. And even more so with this pandemic, we realize how small the degrees are of separation where somebody can have COVID and give it to somebody else and give it to somebody else. So we understand, whether it's through COVID, through gun violence, that we are all connected in one way, shape, or form. And we also understand that we all, again, want the basic same things in life: to feel safe, happy, healthy, a livable wage job, and all of those things that I think are the American dream. And when we see our kids dying at the hands of gun violence, uh, we can't all help but to feel it in one way or another. And I think more people are starting to feel it now than ever before. And if you can feel some sort of empathy, then it is your problem. It's all of our problem. Because it can't be your problem when you're driving down the street and you get hit with a straight bullet and you're like, oh, now, it's affecting me. We have to think about, if your kid was in that situation, if it was your family member, and you hear, in these debates, people looking into the camera say, you've been affected by somebody with COVID, like your family member, he might not be sitting at the kitchen table, like it's the same thing. So why don't you have that empathy, and why don't you feel like, it couldn't be you or your kid?
Mayor Mike Perzicki, who was one of the people who helped you obtain the building for Teen Warehouse, the building that has been utilized for teens to directly combat things like gun violence. Do you think that he is doing enough in the leadership position that he is in? Do you think that he is speaking out enough about the gun violence issue? And what would you suggest that community leaders need to be doing more, if not?
I don't think I'm doing enough. We have a saying. I coach high school soccer and basketball at Sanford, where I graduated from in 2000. And one of our sayings is, good enough never is. So the reason why I work tirelessly is because I never feel like it's ever good enough. So no one elected official, no one community leader, no one is doing enough. Enough will be when we don't have to talk about it anymore. Like when you don't have to ask that question, that's when it's enough. And so no, nobody is doing enough. I think we can all do more. And I think where we can all do more is realizing that we can do more together. And too often everyone wants to be on their own island and do their own thing. And, I see it with, these elections, like it's you versus them, or it's us versus them, or it's we're doing it over here and you're not doing it over there, or if you're doing it, then we can't do it. With the work group, the Warehouse, REACH, Riverside, and Kingswood, we operated under a model of, we call it Thanksgiving, like every day's Thanksgiving. So we ask all of our partners, bring your best dish to the table. Like at the Warehouse, we don't do any of our own program whatsoever. We rely on our partners around the city and the state to provide the programming and the services, because we understand that together we're much stronger than we are apart. So that's the way we operate. And I think all of us as leaders, whether you're elected official, community member, you're a pastor, whomever, we have to begin. When I say begin, because I know, obviously we're doing it and other are doing it, but we have to do more. We're not doing enough of coming together.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting you said that because people oftentimes say, we are better together. Let us work together. But sometimes the hangup ends up being personal agendas. What do you advise on how people can work on one accord and leave the personal agendas at home in order to really work together and move as one community?
Well, I mean, I can't speak what everybody should be doing, or what they do now, but I can tell you what we do. Everything we do, we lead with the community. So, for example, three organizations. The mission at Kingswood Community Center is to empower the community to reach its full potential. The mission at REACH Riverside is, well, actually not the tagline at REACH Riverside is with the community for the community. And the tagline at the warehouse is for teens by teens. So in everything we do, we put the community first. And I think through your question, my response would be, if you're making a decision, is that the best decision for the community? And with the pandemic, our response to the pandemic with the Riverside Relief Fund, my initial thought and our initial thought wasn't, how do we save Kingswood? Our initial thought is, what can we do for the community? And through making the best decision for what we can do for the community and with the community, we ended up being in a better position at Kingswood, REACH Riverside, and the warehouse, because we have so many people coming to us because of what we did. But that wasn't our reason behind it. Our reason behind it was the community is in need. The community is hurting. And we have this great vision of what the community is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. It does us no good if the community can't make it through the next 5 to 10 months. So we're not focused on our revenue and operating in our business. We were focused on what we can do for the community. And then in turn, we also, I was not going to lay anyone off or get rid of anybody during the pandemic. So we kept all of our employees. And because we made that decision to take care of our own people, when the stimulus package came out, the CARES Act, and they put out grants and funding that supported businesses, part of it was, well, you have to keep your budget and employ a certain amount of people. We had already decided to do that. So, when you make the right decisions and do the right thing, you will be blessed. And, that's what we see. The stars continue to align for our organizations because we make decisions with the community first.
And as we come to a close, Logan, what is next for the Teen Warehouse? What are some things that people can start looking forward to? Whether that is about the Teen Warehouse or Kingswood or REACH Riverside. We kind of already talked about REACH Riverside and what's happening in the next few months there. But as far as the Teen Warehouse, really, what are some things people can expect?
So with the warehouse, the next thing people can expect is that we're probably going to put out some type of communication broadly, where we'll be looking to hire those teens, 25 for each actually probably more, every 90 days, and giving them opportunities to be paid, explore different careers, and figure out what they want to do with the rest of their life. And I think the way we're going to approach in terms of phasing them into the building is that those that are employed with us can be in the building and take advantage of the programming, and then continue to add that number as we go through the number of cohorts. So, by the time we reach mid to end of next year, we can have more than 100 teens have access to the building. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to persist or last, but we know that if we have a meaningful relationship with our teens, that we can expect that they'll be responsible enough to make sure that they adhere to the different protocols and such, so we don't contribute to the downside of what this pandemic has brought us, that we continue to look at the upside and the silver lining.
Thank you so much, Logan. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this valuable information with our viewers. Just once before we get out of here, please let us know where people can keep up with REACH, keep up with Kingswood, keep up with the Teen Warehouse. And you.
Yeah. Well, the only social media I have is Facebook, so I am on Facebook. But all of our organizations are on Facebook. The warehouse is listed under Teen Warehouse on Facebook, and REACH Riverside and Kingswood Community Center. You can find us, on LinkedIn, REACH Riverside, Instagram. And, if you want to email me directly, it's my first initial L, my last name Herring, at reachriverside.org. And then our websites, I'll just send you to one website, which is our landing page, which is workgroup.org, WRK group.org. And from that landing page, you can visit all of our websites. And we're always looking for people to bring their best dish to the table, and whether you want to contribute as a volunteer, financially, if you have resources that you want, contacts that you want to send us, there's always room at our table.
And one more time, where they can apply for the position that is now open.
So it's on Indeed. If you go to our various, if you go to Reach Riverside's Facebook page, I believe it's on there. It's on my Facebook page, on LinkedIn. Just search Reach Riverside, and the position should come up. It's a director of marketing and communications, and we're looking for extreme talent that can cover the full gamut of marketing and communications. But the most important thing is that you're passionate about the community and this work, because that's something that you can't replicate.
Thank you so much, Logan, for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you for watching. For more news, updates, and information, you can always head back here and hang out with me on Up with India. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning.